Silent battlefields, where historic photos whisper the untold stories of war and human memory. On the old street of Lvov city, Russian soldiers walked steadily in the pale morning sunlight. The sound of their boots echoed between the silent houses like the drumbeat of victory. Everyone's face was marked with fatigue, but their eyes were bright with determination. They marched not only carrying weapons, but also the belief in the coming day of peace. The endless stream of people symbolized the Red Army's unyielding strength on the journey to wipe out fascism from Europe. Amidst the ruins of Trapp's station, charred locomotives stood silently as witnesses to the steel storm that had just passed. The collapsed dome, the bent iron frame, and debris scattered on the ground created a tragic picture of war. There was no more train whistle, only cold smoke wafting through the gray space. The Allied bombing had destroyed the enemy's logistical base, but also left a tragic mark on the heart of resilient France. On February 19, 1945, the beach of Iwo Jima shook as the landing craft of the U.S. Marines swept ashore in smoke and fire. Groups of soldiers rushed onto the black sand, dragging mobile artillery amid thunderous explosions. In front of them was the Japanese Army's solid defense system. Behind them was the boundless sea. That moment marked the beginning of a fierce war, where courage and the will to survive were tested to the utmost in hell on earth. In the sparsely lit forest, the Italian Army's tank squadrons of 1939 to 1945 lined up in straight lines like steel beasts, ready to charge into battle. The young soldiers wore steel helmets. Their eyes were determined, their hands placed on the cold metal body of the tank. The sound of the iron chains echoed with the sound of the wind, creating a tense sound of wartime. In the midst of that quiet scene, the breath of history seemed to be waiting for the moment of explosion of the upcoming fierce war. In the midst of the brutal Italian campaign during World War II, a U.S. Army soldier is seen intently aiming through the scope of a bazooka during combat training. His face shows concentration and determination, ready for the battles to come. The bazooka, the main anti-tank weapon, symbolizes the technological prowess and indomitable fighting spirit of American soldiers on the European front. In 1938, Nazi shock troops marched through the streets of Germany in an atmosphere of tension and hatred. They carried large signs with the inciting words, "Germans, defend yourselves, don't buy from Jews." The march was not only anti-Semitic propaganda, but also the opening step of a wave of brutal violence and discrimination that would later lead to the Holocaust. On June 6, 1944, at Colleville-sur-Mer, Normandy, a large group of American assault troops from the 3rd Battalion, 16th Regiment, 1st Infantry Division, took a break after crossing the blood-soaked beach. Leaning against the chalk cliffs, they took a rare breath of fresh air before pushing inland. Their fellow medics quickly bandaged minor wounds, while artillery fire echoed in the distance, signaling that the battle had just begun. In August 1944, during the fierce days of the Warsaw Uprising, Nurse Janina Stensnevska, nicknamed Inka, cared for the wounded soldier Edmund Mikniewski, Mish, in the field hospital of the Koszta Company. Next to them was their little daughter Hanya, a symbol of innocence in the midst of war. In the makeshift room, the groans of the wounded mixed with Inka's gentle voice, a testament to the never-ending kindness in the darkness of war. In the middle of the cold field outside Leningrad, German soldiers crouched in the trenches, their eyes fixed through binoculars to observe the distant target. The rumbling of artillery mixed with the cold wind blowing across the ground covered with gray snow. The tense atmosphere enveloped every breath as death could come at any moment. In that brutal scene, they were silent figures on the front line, a testament to the bloody and desperate war on the cold Russian land. In August 1944, in the midst of the Warsaw Uprising, a group of captured German prisoners of war were held in the courtyard of a townhouse on Zielna Street. Dust and gunpowder still hung in the air as Polish resistance fighters guarded them with determined eyes. Against the backdrop of the city's ruins, the image vividly captured a rare turning point, when an invader becomes a prisoner of his own battlefield. Amidst the bustle of a United Service Organization (USO) event circa 1943, a woman in a bikini gracefully walks among the ranks of smiling and amused American servicemen. Performances and entertainment like this were organized by the USO to ease the war fatigues, bringing joy and optimism to American soldiers serving in World War II. Around September 18, 1944, in the newly liberated Belgian town of Aalst, a soldier of the Irish Guard smiled as he accepted a cigar from a local resident. In the jubilant atmosphere after long days of occupation, the small gift became a symbol of gratitude and joy of reunion. This simple yet emotional image depicts the warm military-civilian relationship amid the flames of World War II. December 1944, the suburbs of Holland shook after a flying bomb attack. In the chaos, American soldiers knelt by the railway tracks, trying to treat civilians amid the dust and groans. Each blanket was hastily wrapped, each wound was bandaged with all the compassion in the midst of war. This photo not only tells the story of the cruelty of bombs and bullets, but also depicts the glimmer of humanity in the darkness of a bloody era. Around 1942, amid the white clouds, a squadron of B-17G Flying Fortresses of the United States Air Force quietly entered German airspace. The giant machines glided in tight formation, the sun reflecting off their cold metal shells. Inside, the pilots were highly concentrated, aiming for Emden, the industrial heart of Nazi Germany. Each flight was a gamble between life and death, but also a symbol of the courage and unyielding determination of an entire generation. Amid the ruins of Isigny, an Allied convoy slowly made its way through the desolate streets towards Cherbourg. Dust rose from the broken bricks, covering the gray sky. People stood by the roadside, silently watching with eyes filled with joy and hope. After days of bombs and bullets, the sounds of engines and wheels brought a new rhythm of life. From the ashes of war, Isigny began its journey of revival in the light of peace. During the period from 1939 to 1946, in the midst of World War II, the image of young sailors on the HMS Victory diligently removing a mine evokes a feeling of both excitement and admiration. Under the dim light of the magic lantern, their every move was performed with absolute precision. The detonator had been removed, but tension still hung in the air. That moment demonstrated the silent courage of people who fought not with guns and bullets, but with extraordinary intelligence and calmness. In the suffocating space of the Warsaw Ghetto, old Jewish men stood huddled together, arms raised in despair. Their eyes were weary and filled with fear as the Gestapo searched them, one by one, seeking the so-called New Order through violence and contempt. The photograph was found on the body of a German officer killed in battle in Moscow, a cruel testament to an era when humanity was stifled by the sound of enemy boots and the pain of innocent people. The Second Sino-Japanese War, July 7, 1937, September 9, 1945, was a military conflict fought primarily between the Republic of China and the Empire of Japan. After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the war merged into the larger conflict of World War II as a major front in what is widely known as the Pacific War. Although the two countries had been fighting intermittently since 1931, all-out war began in 1937 and only ended with Japan's surrender in 1945. The war was the result of Japan's decades-long imperialist policy of dominating China politically and militarily, and protecting its vast reserves of raw materials and other economic resources, especially food and labor. Before 1937, China and Japan had fought small, localized skirmishes known as incidents. However, for various reasons, the two sides refrained from engaging in all-out war. In 1931, the Japanese Kwantung Army invaded Manchuria following the Mukden Incident. The last of these, the Marco Polo Bridge Incident of 1937, marked the beginning of full-scale war between the two countries. In March 1945, on Iwo Jima, U.S. Marines embarked on one of the bloodiest battles in history. They climbed steep slopes covered in volcanic ash, while Japanese artillery and machine gun fire rained down. Every step was a life-or-death struggle, with comrades falling right beside them. The photo capturing that tragic moment not only shows the fierceness of war, but also honors the courage and indomitable will of people on the brink of death. On February 21, 1945, in the stormy waters of the Pacific, the U.S. aircraft carrier Saratoga was rocked by a Japanese suicide plane crashing into the deck, turning it into a sea of fire. Black smoke billowed, metal screeched, and screams echoed across the deck. Soldiers rushed to the rescue, battling the flames and the looming death. That moment marked one of the fiercest battles, where courage was tested in a sea of blood and gunfire. Amid the smoke and flames of the Battle of Iwo Jima in 1945, a U.S. Marine crouched in a shallow sandpit, holding a field phone amid a hail of gunfire. Sweat and dirt covered his face, but his eyes shone with determination. In that tense moment, each transmitted signal could determine the fate of an entire unit. The image captures the steely spirit and courage of men fighting on the fragile boundary between life and death. During the fierce days of World War II, the Pacific coast became a witness to one of the fiercest battles. The photo captured the scene after New Zealand forces retook the position from the Japanese. Under the cliffs and rising waters, the traces of the battle were still deeply imprinted, a testament to the brutality of the conflict. In that scene, the sea was eerily calm, as if swallowing the last echoes of an uncompromising confrontation. The sound of British tank chains echoed on the small street of the city of Ede, Netherlands, carrying the explosive joy of the Day of Freedom. People rushed to both sides of the street, their hands raised high in joy to welcome the liberators. Their faces were radiant with tears, and the flags fluttered in the wind as if singing a song of triumph. After the dark years of war, the light of peace finally shone on Europe, marking the end of the nightmare called Nazi Germany. In the sparsely lit forest, the Italian Army's tank squadrons of 1939 to 1945 lined up in straight lines like steel beasts, ready to charge into battle. The young soldiers wore steel helmets. Their eyes were determined, their hands placed on the cold metal body of the tank. The sound of the iron chains echoed with the sound of the wind, creating a tense sound of wartime. In the midst of that quiet scene, the breath of history seemed to be waiting for the moment of explosion of the upcoming fierce war. Cheers echoed through the streets of Paris as trucks carrying American soldiers passed through the crowd of welcoming people. People's hands reached out to touch the heroes who brought freedom and peace. Bright smiles, tearful eyes, and small flags fluttering in the wind created an emotional scene. In the midst of a city once held back by the darkness of war, the joy of liberation exploded like a flame, warming the hearts of Paris on that historic day in 1944. A record time of only 6.5 hours, the sound of hammers and steel clashing together with the sound of water created a melody of will and speed. When the sun rose, the convoy of military vehicles crossed the new bridge, opening the way for the campaign to advance deep into German territory. On that river, the power of intelligence and bravery marked an unforgettable miracle. From the hillside overlooking the Normandy Sea, rows of American soldiers quietly advanced in the mist of the morning of June 6, 1944. Beneath their feet was a sandy beach bearing the traces of the fierce landing. In the distance were endless convoys of vehicles and warships. The sound of waves mixed with the sound of wind as if to cheer for that steadfast step. Each soldier carried in his heart the belief in freedom, opening the way for the great counteroffensive that would free Europe from the darkness of war. May 1945. Members of the Danish resistance movement escort 2 women arrested for their relations with the Nazis during the war. The brutal scene at Iwo Jima, March 1945. 4 U.S. Marines huddle down a charred hillside as a Japanese bunker explodes, billowing smoke engulfing the sky. The ground is bare. The trees are burned to the bone, depicting the naked brutality of war. The photo was praised by Life as one of the most horrifying and realistic images, capturing the moment when a small human being faced with the enormous destruction of the Iwo Jima battlefield. The Second Sino-Japanese War, July 7, 1937, September 9, 1945, was a military conflict fought primarily between the Republic of China and the Empire of Japan. Following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the war merged with the larger conflict of World War II as a major front in what is widely known as the Pacific War. Although the 2 countries had fought intermittently since 1931, full-scale war began in earnest in 1937 and only ended with Japan's surrender in 1945. The war was the result of Japan's decades-long imperialist policy of dominating China politically and militarily, and protecting its vast reserves of raw materials and other economic resources, especially food and labor. Prior to 1937, China and Japan had fought small, localized skirmishes. However, for various reasons, both sides refrained from launching a full-scale war. In 1931, the Japanese Kwantung Army invaded Manchuria following the Mukden Incident. The last of these was the Marco Polo Bridge Incident in 1937, which marked the beginning of a full-scale war between the 2 countries. On August 26, 1944, the Champs-Élysées resounded with cheers as Allied tanks rolled into the heart of Paris. The dust of war still lingered in the air, but the eyes of the people were bright with joy and victory. Hands were waving high, smiles filled with tears, blending into a chorus of freedom. After years of occupation, Paris awoke in pride and happiness, marking the glorious day of historic liberation. This disturbing photograph captures the moment after World War II, when a French woman had her head shaved in public as punishment for allegedly collaborating or having relations with occupying German soldiers. Her face is blank, her eyes blank with shame and hatred, while those around her look on indifferently. The images reveal a dark chapter where honor and revenge collided with post-war rage. The heartbreaking photograph captures the moment when the children were left with nothing but bones in the Auschwitz concentration camp. Once known as the hell on earth of World War II, On their emaciated bodies were traces of starvation and cruel experiments carried out by the Nazis. In their innocent eyes, the fear and despair seemed to have exceeded the endurance of childhood. Amid the darkness of crime, those children still exist as witnesses to a painful period of history that humanity must never forget. Amidst the ruins of Leipzig in 1945, a little girl sat on the cold tile floor, clutching an old doll tightly in her arms. Behind her, soldiers and the rubble of war were still scattered. But in that moment, her world was filled with only innocence and her small love for the only toy left. Amidst the chaotic remnants of war, her image was like a fragile light of childhood that had not yet faded. On the Normandy beach strewn with rocks and gunfire, American soldiers bravely advanced amid fierce gunfire. A wounded man was helped up by his comrades, his face grimacing in pain, but his eyes still shining with unyielding will. The sound of the waves mixed with the roar of war created the tragic music of D-Day. Each step they took was imprinted in the cold sand, paving the way for freedom and hope, marking a great turning point in the war against fascism. On April 12, 1945, in the Merkers salt mine in Germany, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, and General Omar N. Bradley, commander of the 12th Army Group, carefully examined a suitcase filled with precious silver. This was part of the huge booty hidden by the Nazis. That moment clearly reflected the brutality of war and the secrets that the Allies gradually discovered. The photograph captures a horrific moment in history. Under the shadow of the Nazi helmets and expressionless faces, a group of women are dragged into the middle of the street, bewildered, naked, and without any choice. The silent sound of helpless hands, the fateful gaze forward, all serve as a warning that humanity can lose its dignity and freedom in a single moment. This historic photograph captures a haunting moment during the war in China. Amidst the devastation, innocent civilians face severe punishment at the hands of the occupying forces. Behind the lens is the pain of a nation, a reminder of the terrible consequences of war and violence. The photo not only records the past, but also reminds humanity of the value of peace and humanity. U.S. Marines carry a near-dead baby, pulled from under a rock in a cave on Saipan in the summer of 1944. The baby was the only survivor among hundreds of corpses in the cave. Saipan, part of the Mariana Islands, had been a Japanese colony since World War I. By the end of 1943, it was home to more than 29,000 Japanese. In June-July 1944, the U.S. landed on Saipan, defeated the Japanese army, and controlled the island until now. The introduction of the American gas mask in combat. To protect troops from chemical attacks, the United States issued gas masks widely. Training ensured that soldiers could quickly put on masks when attacked. This protective device saved many lives in the mustard gas environment. Masks became an essential part of combat gear. Their use marked a new era in chemical warfare defense. For much of the war, the Germans had absolute air dominance. The mighty and fearsome Luftwaffe, commanded by Hermann Göring, was the largest and most powerful air force in World War II. They had devastated London during the Battle of Britain. Here, however, the British got at least a small measure of revenge, bombing German-held Abbeville airfield in France. In the middle of a vast field, a Russian officer bowed respectfully to Prince Cannon in a solemn scene. Beside him stood his loyal warhorse, motionless, like a silent witness to history. On the prince's face shone the calm and majesty of a man who had experienced 2 great wars. He was not only a general, but also a symbol of honor and loyalty, an image that made that moment immortal in the flow of history. In order to demoralize the Chinese defenders, Japanese military officials reportedly ordered the execution of all captured prisoners. The war in the Orient was now a merciless war. Here are some of the Chinese prisoners patiently awaiting death at the execution ground, where they would be captured by the Japanese. 3 young women, Janice Cooper, Marilyn Connor, and Gloria Ellickson, attracted all eyes while sunbathing at Steeplechase Park on Coney Island, New York, in the 1940s. What was special was that they wore unique swimsuits made from World War II Air Force escape maps, a meaningful gift from their pilot boyfriends. The image was both sexy, daring, and full of wartime imprints of a turbulent period. Amidst the sound of drills and metal collisions, these women were not only assembling planes, they were building hope for the world. When men went to war, they became silent warriors in factories. Their soft hands now held tools tightly. Their steadfast eyes turned to the bomb-filled sky. War had robbed them of their youth, but it had also turned them into indomitable symbols of strength and courage. Nurses, air raid prevention workers, and rescue workers tend to injured hospital patients, waiting on stretchers to be taken to nearby hospitals, after an air raid by a Nazi German Vergeltungswaffe Fiesler Fi-103 V1 Doodlebug bomber that hit Lewisham Hospital on the 26th of July, 1944, in London, England. In March 1945, in the midst of the fierce Battle of Iwo Jima, a Boeing B-29 heavy bomber was forced to make an emergency landing on a runway filled with smoke and flames. Immediately after touching down, the giant plane burst into flames, turning into a fireball in the middle of the battlefield. The image was both tragic and heroic, reflecting the extreme harshness of war and the sacrifices that air crews had to face in each mission. Since his childhood, Vladimir Putin grew up listening to the stories of war that his parents had experienced. His father, a brave Red Army soldier, faced death in the life-and-death struggle against the Nazis. His mother, a resilient woman in the besieged city of Leningrad, survived the days of hunger, cold, and immense loss. Their stories were not only family memories, but also profound lessons about patriotism, sacrifice, and indomitable will. In his small apartment in Leningrad after the war, young Putin listened to each story with all his young heart. It was those memories that engraved in his mind the belief that Russia could only survive when its people knew how to stand up, protect, and remember the past. Over the years, those memories became an inseparable part of the way he viewed World War II. Not just history, but a legacy of blood, tears, and national pride. 70 years after the victory over Nazi Germany, the Kremlin's most powerful man stands in the middle of Red Square, where the footsteps of those troops still echo. Vladimir Putin is preparing to preside over a grand military parade, not only to celebrate victory, but also to remember the war that shaped his view of Russia and its place in the modern world. Born in 1952, more than 7 years after the guns fell silent, Putin did not personally experience the brutal years of what Russians call the Great Patriotic War. But those memories are never far away from him. They live in the stories of his parents, in old photographs, and in the deep pride of every Russian. For Putin, commemorating victory is not just a ritual, but also a continuation of collective memory, where courage, sacrifice, and a fierce desire to defend the fatherland converge. Instead, the memories of the war that Vladimir Putin often talks about are not based on his own experiences, but are woven into simple stories at family dinners. His father, also named Vladimir, often recounted the harsh years he spent in the Red Army. He served in a unit of the NKVD, the precursor to the KGB, of which Putin later became a part. One day, his unit was ordered to advance on the town of Kingisepp, near the Estonian border. But they were ambushed by German troops after being betrayed by the locals. Of the 28 soldiers who went, only 4 returned alive, and Putin's father was one of them. After the battle, he was sent to nearby Leningrad, which was under siege. The city was under constant bombardment, and during one battle, he was seriously injured by a grenade explosion and hospitalized. Those stories, told in the dim light of dinner, were deeply imprinted on the young Putin's mind, nurturing in him admiration for his father's generation and the belief that Russia's strength was born from the endurance and resilience of its people. While his father was fighting at the front, his mother Maria faced another war, the battle for survival in the heart of the besieged city of Leningrad. For 900 days and nights, the city was cold, hungry, and the sound of artillery shells echoed constantly. Food was almost gone, and people had to share thin slices of bread, made from sawdust and the remnants of barley. Maria was so exhausted that one day, while trudging through the snow-covered streets and among the corpses, she fainted. The body collectors thought she was dead and put her in with the other victims. It was only when her husband, who had just returned from the trenches after being wounded, recognized her and pulled her out of the pile of corpses that she was saved. But fate was cruel, and their eldest son, Victor, succumbed to diphtheria during the days of medicine and food shortages. That story of famine, loss, and fragile life amidst the flames of war was deeply engraved in the memory of young Vladimir Putin, nurturing in him the belief that the strength of the Russian people is born from pain and resilience to overcome hardship. His parents' stories instilled in Putin a deep appreciation for the brutality of war and a belief that Russian history should not be judged by others. As an adult, he carried that memory with him to make sense of disputed history. He believed that the Soviet Union, in the dark years before the war, was forced to choose between 2 equally risky paths. In August 1939, Berlin and Moscow signed a non-aggression pact, a secret agreement dividing up spheres of influence in Europe, with Poland divided and the Baltic states placed under Soviet control. Decades later, the document was officially ratified by Mikhail Gorbachev in 1989. But in Putin's eyes, it was not a manifestation of hegemonic ambitions, but a desperate attempt to protect the country before war broke out. He argues that the West initiated the betrayal when Britain and France signed the Munich Agreement with Adolf Hitler in 1938, abandoning Czechoslovakia and leaving the Soviet Union to fend for itself. For Putin, those decisions were not just political strategy, but evidence of a period of Russian encirclement, where pride and obsession with survival went hand in hand with history. Putin has said that Soviet leaders felt betrayed and isolated after Munich. They realized that when the West chose to compromise with Hitler, the threat was not only hanging over Czechoslovakia, but was also creeping closer to the Soviet Union's eastern borders. In this context, Stalin decided to sign the pact with Germany, a move he believed would protect national security and interests, even though it would cost him skepticism and criticism from the world. Putin later recalled that people could criticize Stalin or the Soviet generals all they wanted, but at that time, no one could be sure that they would win if they rejected the pact. And then, history proved that the temporary agreement was just the calm before the storm. In 1941, Nazi Germany suddenly betrayed and launched the largest offensive in human history, pouring millions of soldiers and terrible firepower into Soviet territory. Cities were engulfed in flames, villages were flattened, and millions of people died. It was a moment when the entire nation had to rise up, not only to fight the enemy, but also to regain its own existence. In these stories, Putin not only heard the gunshots of the past, but also felt the spiritual strength that helped Russia overcome the darkness of war. According to Putin, no one can fully understand the price the Soviet Union paid in that fierce war. When he talks about World War II, his voice often drops, as if speaking for the millions of souls left on the frozen fields. He emphasizes that the scale of that sacrifice is beyond imagination. While Western countries like Britain lost about 350,000 people, and the United States about 500,000, his country had to bear the terrible toll of more than 25 million lives. Each of those numbers is not just a soldier, but also mothers, fathers, children who starved to death in besieged cities or died under bombs. They are villages wiped out, families broken, people who returned with both physical and mental wounds. For Putin, these are not just cold statistics of history, but memories flowing in the veins of the Russian people. Pain and pride combined into one. He believed that the world must bow to that sacrifice, because without the blood and tears of millions of Soviet people, humanity would probably never have regained peace. Stories about his parents, about war, about life and death, have nurtured in Vladimir Putin a deep belief that Russia was built on the blood, tears, and resilience of millions of people. Through each story and memory, he not only saw the past, but also saw the strength that helped his people stand up after the devastation. It is a memory that no one is allowed to forget. If you also feel that indomitable spirit, please like and subscribe to the channel to continue exploring the most authentic and moving historical stories with us. In the vast sands of the North African desert, a column of British tanks pushed forward through the dust after their glorious victory at El Alamein. The scorching sun reflected off the heavy steel, creating a majestic scene of strength and belief. Each track left its mark of victory, paving the way for freedom to spread. Against the misty, sandy sky, a small flag fluttered like a symbol of indomitable will. In the smoky sky of the Pacific Ocean, an American soldier jumped out of his plane. His parachute opened in the fierce wind, carrying him down to the burning island of Iwo Jima. Below him was a battlefield filled with artillery and blood, where life and death were only a heartbeat apart. In that moment, he was no longer an ordinary person, but a symbol of courage, of faith in the mission that the whole world was placing on the shoulders of that generation. On February 19, 1945, the beach of Iwo Jima shook as the landing craft of the U.S. Marines swept ashore in smoke and fire. Groups of soldiers rushed onto the black sand, dragging mobile artillery amid thunderous explosions. In front of them was the Japanese Army's solid defense system. Behind them was the boundless sea. That moment marked the beginning of a fierce war, where courage and the will to survive were tested to the utmost in hell on earth. After February 1945, the day Iwo Jima was occupied by the U.S. in the Pacific War, U.S. Marines raised high the Japanese flags they had captured from the enemy when they took the island. From February 23, 1945, U.S. soldiers engaged in a fierce battle to capture the island, which was an ideal launching pad for B-29 bombers to attack Japan. During the war, the island was one of the Japanese air bases. On the cold street of Colmar, France, German soldiers bowed their heads and walked silently after surrendering. The pale winter sunlight shone on the wooden fences and gray walls, reflecting the historic moment of February 2, 1945. The heavy footsteps echoed in the silent space, like the closing of a cruel chapter. The liberation of Colmar was not only a victory for the Allies, but also the first breath of freedom returning to French soil. This moment was like a living symbol of the team spirit and bravery of World War II. The soldiers on the ground lined up neatly beside their bicycles, raising their hands in farewell as the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress roared into the sky. They knew that each flight carried with it hope and immeasurable danger. The sound of the engines and the cheers became a farewell song, marking a time when courage was the only thing stronger than fear. Amidst the rubble and cracked walls, a birthday party was held with loud laughter. It was the birthday of Christine Pierce, a little girl in Hammersmith, London, on July 17, 1944. Her house had been destroyed by a V-1 bomb just 3 weeks earlier. But her family and neighbors gathered around a simple wooden table. In the devastated scene, they raised their glasses, shared smiles and hopes, a testament to the indomitable spirit of Londoners during the war.